All right, get some people coming in. All right, well, we're going to get it started. So thank you all for coming. This is our professional development series. Wednesdays at noon. It's great to see you all here. I love seeing so many familiar faces week to week. My name is Don Saucier. I'm the Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. I do want to make a couple of shout outs before I give it over to our main event today. First of all, yesterday we launched our Teachers Telling Stories video series. If you saw that on our social media or you saw it in our newsletter, we started out with a doozy. If you haven't seen the story that Linda Yarrow tells about duct tape, you need to see that because you cannot unhear that story after you've heard it. It is amazing. And we're looking to send out more videos pretty much every Tuesday, Thursday for the foreseeable future as they come in. Some of you that I'm seeing, you're on our list. We've already contacted you for stories and you're working with us. If anyone else is like, well, I have a story to tell, we want you to tell it. So reach out for us. We'll tell you what we need in those videos and we would be happy to promote your story. We also have, as we near the close of the year, we have our Teaching and Learning Center Professional Development Certificate that you can, earn credits toward and those kind of things. Also the possibility to apply to be a Teaching and Learning Center Fellow. And this is my transition to Taylor Jennings. She is one of our first Teaching and Learning Center Fellows from last year. So what happens is one of the things in your fellow application is you get to tell us, if you were a fellow, what workshop would you do for us next year? And here we have the first product of that. So Taylor Jennings, I'm very excited to have you here today. You're going to be telling us about how we can engage and inspire and learn from our international students. And I think every student at K-State has a valuable contribution to make. And I love that you're kind of helping with the International Student Resource. So the floor is yours. And I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you so much, Dawn. And thank you, Tucker. I'm really happy to be here today. I was telling Dawn, it's been a while ago since I wrote that blurb. I don't think I'd take it back if I could, but it's been a long time coming. So thank you so much for having me today. And thank you all for being here today on your lunch break. So sit back and relax and engage if you want. Just be a receptor if that's how you choose to participate, but thank you for having me today. Like Dawn said, my name is Taylor Jennings, and today is the Teaching and Learning Session Professional Development Series, engaging and supporting our international students, and I'm going to be sharing some resources and tools and best practices for doing that. I know we are online today in many places, but before I begin, I want to acknowledge the space in which we are gathering. Kansas is home to 4 federally recognized tribes. At Kansas State, we are gathered on the occupied territory of the Kaw people who have stewarded this land for generations. Kansas State is one of the ancestral lands of the Kansa, the Kaw people, and Kansas is the home of 4 tribal nations, the Iowa of Kansas and Nebraska, Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation, and the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska. So to start, I want to begin by asking you a few questions to kind of set the mood for getting a little bit of a glimpse of the experience of our international students. So I'm going to start with a poll. First, completely optional. It is anonymous, but it's a completely optional poll if you just want to listen, but if you want to participate. And some of the questions you might not be sure how to answer, but just answer to the best of what you think the best answer would be. So if you would, I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer our poll questions. There are only 2. It's pretty short. Okay. I'll give you about 5 more seconds if you want to participate. Okay. So, have you ever studied abroad? Pretty close to sitting at almost 50% there. We have 43 yes and 57% no. And this can be varied. It can be short-term exchanges. It can be for a full experience, your entire educational degree. And then how many languages do you speak? Majority at 70%, about 5, say 2. And then we have 2 people that speak 4 or more languages. So thank you. Before I talk about our students, I want to talk a little bit about myself in the research. So I started my international journey in my undergrad when I studied abroad. I studied in Mexico and Chile. It actually probably goes back further. I think a lot of us today, when we're doing what we're doing, we can probably say, hey, when I was a little kid, I remember doing this. It plays into who I am today. The Last Lecture is a wonderful book about seeing who we are in our younger selves and our passions, and seeing how it is who we are today. So I do believe that's true. But a lot of my journey began when I studied abroad in my undergraduate. And then for my teaching practicum in my master's program, I taught high school Spanish. And following my graduation, I taught English in the Dominican Republic. So that was my first experience teaching international students, although they weren't international students, but it was an international experience for me. And I began working at K-State with international students in 2013. And enjoying my experience, I decided I wanted to study a little bit more about international students. So I started taking classes. My first class was college student development class with Dr. Kraft, and sitting there and hearing about student development, how it's such a crucial time. And for me, my undergraduate experience was personally hard. And so I was always amazed at students, even though I was going 2 hours from home and still having a really hard time with separation and figuring it out. We were having students come across the world and thriving, not only just succeeding, but thriving in their environment. So I've always been interested in the development of our students and inspired by them. And recently it has led to me being interested in connecting our international students with some of our K-State students. So I teach a CAT class, Global Conversations, that connects my students with some of the international student population. And in January, I began teaching ESL at OCCC. It's a federally grant-funded program, and it's a different population because instead of students, which I'm going to be talking about today, these is for immigration and work purposes. So it's a little different population, but still international. So our agenda today, I'm going to give you a little bit of a breakdown of the international students today in the US, and then talk more about our student population at K-State. A little bit of the process of after acceptance. So the process to getting here is one of the bigger hurdles to being a student, an international student. I'll talk about the different contributions that students make to our campus, some of the challenges that they face, COVID-19 impact, which I'm sure we all can relate to, and then most importantly, how we can engage and support our students. So throughout kind of the keys for support, I'm going to provide you with different resources, tools, and best practices. So if you see these symbols, you'll know if they are a resource, tool, or best practice. So let's talk about international students in the US. The data that I'm going to be talking about is for 2019-2020. I'll talk a little bit about more why that is the date and the source that I'm getting it from. So 2019-2020 school year, we had over 1 million students. International students are defined as non-immigrant students in the US on temporary visas at the post-secondary level. So this is kind of the definition of how we define them. There are other types of terms used. Sometimes you'll hear foreign students, but for this, we're going to talk about international student population. All of my data for the international in the US numbers come from Open Doors. Have any of you all ever heard of Open Doors? A little bit? If you're ever going to write a report about international students or you want data, this is one of the best places to look, probably the first place to start looking. So Open Doors started in about 1954, according to Sarkody Mensa, and it's been tracking international students since then. And so we have some pretty rich data on the international students. You will see, unfortunately, in the last year, we had one of our first decreases in almost 10 years. We had a 1.8% decrease in international student numbers. You also can see from the graph, everything that affects our international students, they're pretty, numbers are pretty consistent going up, but they are affected by politics, economics, social impact, technological. So we kind of see those numbers reflected. 1945, 1949, we kind of had something big that helped and affected the international students. Does anybody know what kind of started in 1949 for international students? It was following World War II. Started by a senator. We have the Fulbrights. So the Fulbright Scholarship, it was funded originally by the sale of the United States military surplus following World War II. So that kind of helped with the increase. And there are also other things that affect it. We see the recession affect the numbers, and then we have a huge growth in student numbers. Open Doors also provides us with a breakdown of students by country. Our two biggest populations, China and India, making up 53% of international students in the US. And then we see a big drop off to number 3 and 4, with South Korea being the third largest population, and then Saudi Arabia being the fourth. Open Doors also provides some interactive tools. So I'm going to show you one of them. If you want more breakdown of different data, here you can see it broken down into the countries, and you can also go back into different years. So if we wanted to look at China and what was happening in 2001 or 2002, you can see China wasn't our number one. It was surpassed greatly by India, and even Mexico. We'd had a lot more students. So that's changed quite a bit over the years. So I really like that Open Doors provides. If you want some more background information, they have some really cool tools to narrow down your search of information. So next, it also breaks down our student numbers by their classification. You can see undergraduate and graduate student being the largest chunk, mostly undergraduate, but graduate student is really not far behind the undergraduate makeup. OPT is optional practical training that is usually work after graduation. Students are allowed to work in the United States following graduation. In their field, there are a lot of restrictions, and for so much time, depending on if you're STEM or if you're not STEM. It also provides us with a breakdown of the top places of origin. So China, again, we see is the largest, but it shows us the breakdown, and again, very interesting information, pretty equally divided between undergraduate and graduate students in the US from China, but Saudi Arabia sending mostly undergraduate students, India sending mostly graduate students, and you're also seeing a lot of the students from India staying and working and doing some work experience following their graduation. Other information talks about the field of study. What are these students studying while they're in the United States? Engineering was the top of the list. You can see its increase, math, business management, and social sciences being the top 4. We also have information that breaks it down by not only field of study, but classification. So undergraduates are studying more in the business and management field, and our graduate students are more into the engineering and the math and computer sciences. So you can see what the interest is depending on if they are graduate or undergraduate international students. Also in the field of study, we get to see a breakdown of the country and their field of study. So China, again, is more in the STEM fields. Brazil, you're seeing more of the business and management, same thing. For Vietnam, you have the business and management breakdown. So Open Doors provides all kinds of information about what students are coming, where they're coming from, what they're studying while they are here. So there's tons of information out there on the international student population through Open Doors. Our students here in the US coming to different states, where are they going while they are here? The top 6 states host over 50,000 international students. California having 160, New York 120, and we see some of the other states with international student populations. Which then brings me to Kansas State, our international student population. Anybody in the chat want to guess or maybe know how many international students we have? If anyone wants to look and see. We have, good guess, yeah. Okay, we have a little lower than our number and a little higher than our number. Our number for last year, school year, was 1161 international students, okay, from 99 different countries. So we're represented from a lot of different parts of the world. Our numbers, I'm going to show you in a minute what our numbers look like compared to the national level. But all of this information comes from the Office of International Programs. So they're tracking our information of our international students. So let's take a side-by-side look at these. The US and K-State. International students made up 5.5% of all students in the US. At K-State, of our 20,000, we have 1161. So we're about on average with US, a little higher at 5.57% of our students being international. The top countries, China, India, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, we saw that earlier. The top countries at K-State mirror it in a lot of ways, but we have a couple of differences for different reasons. So China and India are our largest student populations. Saudi Arabia is actually number 3 for us. Our South Korean student population is lower, a lot lower than the national level. And then Paraguay. Paraguay is up there. Does anybody know? You can type in the chat if you want. Why Paraguay? Why would we have so many Paraguayan students at K-State? It actually has a pretty long history. There's something called, yeah, some type of partnership, the Kansas-Paraguay partnership. So it actually dates back to John F. Kennedy's presidency, 1963. And we'll get a lot of students from Paraguay because they sometimes qualify as in-state students. And so it becomes a really good place for them to study abroad. But we have an exchange set up with Paraguay. So our national number at K-State is higher than the national number in comparison of students studying from Paraguay. Also, students, international students, we talked about 1 million to 1161. But the students that are studying abroad from the US in comparison to international students that are coming here is 347,000 sending abroad from the US. K-State is sending 813 students abroad. Of course, all this data you have to remember is pre-COVID. We still don't see the full numbers of what the impact of COVID has been. So in the US, it's a 3.2 to 1 ratio. At K-State, it's a 1.4 to 1 ratio of students who are coming to going abroad. Which that's really good that we are getting such good numbers to have the experience that our international students are having. The next thing I want to talk about is the process for students coming. And a lot of this data comes from Homeland Security. It's a lot different from our student experience. You know, I know a lot of students don't go look at a lot of colleges. For a lot of international students, that's not even an option. Their first time stepping onto campus is the first time before classes start. They don't really get to come and see what the college campus is like or search around. But their process begins by being accepted to a CEVP certified school. SEVP is kind of, it started post 9/11, and SEVP and CVIS, it is the Student in Exchange Visitor Program, and it tracks our international student. It serves as a division of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and it acts as a bridge for government organizations that have an interest in information of non-immigrants. So it basically is tracking our international students. So they have to be accepted first by one of these certified schools. Then comes the I-20 process, which is a certificate of eligibility for non-immigrant students. A lot of our students are F1, and so this I-20 document is really important for them. And it's not an easy document to get. You have to submit an affidavit of some financial support along with a bank statement. Following the I-20 process, then you pay the CVIS fee, which CVIS is the system that tracks the SEVP. And then the process of applying for visas, which is not an easy process for international students. They have to find an embassy in their country. There's an interview process where they can be denied for a visa. Even once you have a visa, you can fly to the United States and still be denied entry into the country. So it's a lot longer and different process for students to even get to the university compared to some of our other students on campus. Our students have a lot of contributions that they bring. Diversity. We know that our students make our campus more diverse. We also know that they bring new perspectives and appreciation of other cultures. So these are things, if you read a research article about international students, this is one of the top reasons international students are recruited, because of what they bring to campus. As far as learning goes, they bring other things, but as far as learning goes, you know, if we're not sending students abroad, where are they getting engagement with other parts or different groups of people? And the international students bring a lot of this to campus. They also bring different research interests as far as competitiveness to the research field. And so the next two things that I'm going to talk about are usually the number one thing that international students are seen as by a lot of people, and that is jobs and dollar signs. So leading up to pre-COVID or 2019, when we first started seeing the decrease, every research article starts with international students are important, they bring this, but unfortunately they are seen as dollar signs. And what are we doing to support these students? Which according to Open Doors, $44 billion are brought to the US economy from international students, and 415,000 jobs, not to mention jobs at K-State. OIP also has information about jobs at K-State, how many are provided at the university and locally through our students. But that's not why we're here. We're not here to focus on the dollar signs that international students bring. Some of the challenges that they face, financial, they are seen as dollar signs. A higher price tag, students will have to pay extra fees, a higher price tag to attend universities in the US. And higher exchange rate for a lot of countries, depending on where they're traveling from, along with work restrictions. I didn't talk about this when I was talking about the process of getting here, but once students are here on their visas, they're very restricted on where they can work. The first year for F1 has to be on campus, so they're limited to the jobs and the ability to make money while they're here studying. Visas, as mentioned earlier, it's a long process. They still can be denied entry even after a visa, and time frame restrictions. All of our students usually face some type of restriction, but the visa is another more strict parameter that our students are having to work in. Discrimination, neo-racism. Lee talks a lot about it's neo-racism, new racism, which is kind of racism without race usually involved. So students can be discriminated against based on origin of country. And pre-COVID, this has been an issue that students have faced studying in the United States. Cultural, one of the another obstacle or challenge that our students face. Foods are different, social groups, time is different, along with a lot of many other aspects. There's a lot of study about the cultural shift that students face. You maybe have heard of it, the U curve, the W curve, but students take a while to adjust to their new environments on top of all of these other challenges that they face. And then, of course, the language barrier. Not only can it be difficult to communicate alone, but they have to worry about perceptions that they have in the classroom, as well as from their peers instructors. So as not only can sometimes communication be a difficulty, but you have to worry about the perceptions that come along with it. I also want to remind people at this point that international students are such a diverse group of population. So when I was showing you the numbers, you know, this aspect for international students might not even be an issue depending on where they're coming from. Depending on their background, this might not be an issue that they face. So it's such a diverse group that they can be facing many different combinations of these challenges. So this next part is actually my research interest, and it's the impact that COVID-19 has had on our international student population, which is, from everything that I've read so far, is turning out to be one of the more significant groups affected by this. I take that back. So before we begin, would you all in the chat maybe, and it doesn't even have to be about international students, how has COVID-19 impacted your students? So in the chat, if you want to share, how has COVID-19 impacted your students? Sarah Thurston, who works with our international students, says we have more Paraguayan students than any other institution in the US. Bravo. Yeah, we have a lot of Paraguayan students. Social isolation. Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of the social impacts of it. Not even able to come to campus this year. They're managing a lot of challenges. Shifting to learning online. Yeah, we've all made the shift. We're professional online teachers now. An enormous amount of uncertainty. Yes, uncertainty for them, for us, for everyone. Difficult adjustment to online learning. Financial pressure with parents losing. Yeah, that's another. Some of them are direct, some more indirect impacts. Huge financial challenges. Yeah, I talked about work restrictions. If campuses are closed and students aren't allowed to work on campus, they're really, really limited on the ways to make money. Isolation feeling, not able to practice language. Yeah, if you're trying to get the real actual experience in language practice, it's a whole other level of being able to speak to a screen while you're talking to someone. Wow, this is an interesting. Brandon shared 20 to 30% of students tested positive. So health concerns on top of that, and we don't even really know the full effects of it, of what the health aspect has been. Thank you all for sharing. Yeah, so that's things that our students are facing, international students are facing. These are just some of the things that students are facing. So 91% of the world student population was impacted by COVID-19. That is a huge number of students, not just studying in the US, but the whole world, the student population was affected. We mentioned earlier that international students are already a vulnerable group for different reasons. This is actually what my even more narrow research question is about is the students, the feeling of the stranded. They were actually, you know, with borders closing, visas, you might remember that there was maybe even a change to some policies that really could affect students' visas, whether they are able to study online. So another restriction students face while they are here is the ability to take online classes. They are restricted in the number that they're able to do. Well, if we're all online, that really is going to affect our students' ability and where they're going to stay. So a lot of the student population was stranded in a sense of where they could go, what they should do and to be able to continue to study. Financial aspects, again, being able to work on campus. Another great point that was brought up, students, parents losing jobs. If they are relying on another source of income, where's the money coming from? It's really interesting too about policies and aid that's coming out and which students were able to qualify for stimulus money versus those who weren't. The social aspect was mentioned. We see a lot of the social aspect along with, unfortunately, we're seeing new growth in xenophobia, especially for the AAPI group. Another effect of the COVID-19 impact. So now we're going to talk about engaging and supporting them. After we see all their challenges, a little bit of the history, the numbers of who these students are, what can we do to better engage and support these students? So I want to share this first. I saw this the other day and I'm so proud of Monopoly. Even Monopoly knows that they need to modernize. So they're changing some of their cards. No more you win money for winning a beauty pageant. But I love this one. It says, you graciously host a group of international students. They appreciate the home cooking. So that's great. Unfortunately, though, if you get this card, you have to pay for each house or hotel. I don't know why they're making you pay. I think you should be rewarded if you are hosting students. But so even Monopoly is on the game of supporting our international students. So engage and support. Financial, we talked about the different challenges, some of the best practices. We are advocates for our students. Most of the scholarships that I have applied for or been awarded have just been simple emails forwarded to me by my professor or my advisor. So I think we can be a great resource in forwarding information to our students. And there is some really good scholarship opportunities for students. So I am going to provide you with a couple in a minute. I'll show you one. So K-State even has international student scholarships. So they will be hearing about these, but you can also be a great advocate in sending this information to your students. So for the visa process, best practice, just be aware that they are probably operating under stricter time limits, different grade expectations. The best thing you can do is refer them. There are wonderful resources on campus. The International Student Scholar Services does all of this for the students. They are on top of everything, sending them emails, reminders, changes in policies. So they are the best resource that you can send your students to for any information about the visa process. For discrimination, best practices, we're in charge of our spaces, our classrooms, our advising appointments. It's up to us to make a safe space for our students. There are also different things that we can do intentionally. Our curriculum, what are we doing in our curriculum to combat these misconceptions? What else could we do when we think about who's at the table to talk about these issues? Just remember that we are able to create these spaces to make them safe spaces for our students. To engage and support them, Culturally, consider using multiple discussion formats. You know, culture affects a lot of different aspects. And so the different modes that we use, the different types of discussion, compared to group think versus individual think, these are all things to consider when you're designing your course. Along with, I want to provide one of my favorite resources today, name tools. Engage your students like you would all of your other students. It's just as important that you know your international students from their family life, their name. You might have more in common with the student from small town Kansas or Missouri, but you equally should get to know your international students and know their names. So I know this isn't an easy aspect and it takes some learning, but there are some really great resources that you can use. So this is called Name Shout. You do have to create an account with it, but it's so easy. And I started using it a while ago, but depending on your student and through cases, you can see what country they're from. It can provide a nice little, so you can play the sound. And it also gives the spelling and the sounds that it makes. So this is a wonderful tool. If you ever aren't sure and you get your list of students before, to save the time of trying to understand in class, if you want to do a little bit of research beforehand, this is one of the tools that I've started using that's been really helpful. And then last, language. Written communication is one of the better practice strategies for our students. Just remember, not all are going to have a language barrier because our international student population is so diverse, but for others that are speaking 2, 3, 4+ languages, it always is helpful to have some form of written communication, homework assignments, put it in writing, important information, put it in writing. It gives students a little different way to process some of the information. And another resource on campus that you might not know about, there is English tutoring through SSC, where students make advising appointments. They can also sign up for English tutoring online through that. So the next thing I want to share with you, before we can even talk about students, you know, I can sit up here and tell you everything that I know about students. ISSS hosted a COVID-19 webinar about international students' experiences through COVID. And the best thing was it was all of the students sharing their experiences. And the best advice was at the end, one student mentioned how the best thing you can do is get to know them. They're normal students. That's what I love to mention when we're talking with my students. It is funny how different things can seem, but when it comes down to it, we're all so much alike. So I want to share with you one of my students, former students who became a classmate and then became a friend. I want you to hear a little bit about his experience of studying at K-State.
The favorite part about studying at K-State, the first thing is the resources, especially libraries and union, because these two things out of your class, and also the environment. Also, it's I feel it's a high quality environment. Yeah, this is the good thing I feel from studying at K-State. One is what is something difficult about being an international at K-State? I think it's not related to K-State, but it's related to be an international in the US, because you know, especially for us in Middle East and other countries, it's far away from there. So if you want to go to visit your family, you need pre-preparation, maybe 2 or 3 months to go there and also to apply again for visa. These are the most difficult things to being an international student here. Because, you know, especially for the most, we are talking about the young student, not the graduate student, because most of them coming with their families. The undergrad, around 18 or 19, 20 years old, it's hard for them to, the first time to leave. So I think the good idea is to increase this non-class activities for 2 reasons. The first reason is to reduce this, missing their families. And the other thing is I found this to improve their speaking and listening.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, when I was for 7 or 8 months alone without my family. So I spent most of my time on campus, participating in any activity on campus, making a friendship with people. I didn't have that much competence because I didn't have any family. My wife was in Iraq, so I had too much time to improve my speaking, my listening, which is I feel is most important. It was the first time for me to leave my family. Making friends helped me a lot because I have to. I had till now I have the communication with them. After I left K-State, so till now I have communication with them, text them, and calling. But at that time, I spent very good time with them.
That was just a small clip. Amr and I talked for over an hour. These students' experiences are so inspiring of all of the things that they've accomplished, the things that they do, and how they enjoy what they do. The students that are able to come study here and find their passion. Let me. Like I said, the best thing you can do is get to know the students and hear their stories about what their experience is like. The last thing I want to share with you is it's a little virtual goodie. It's a little bit of all of the resources plus some additional resources that I didn't share. So if you scan this on the left, it will take you to this document, which is on the TLC webpage. Right now it is in the upcoming events, but it will be moved to the archived events if you aren't able to scan it today. But I have a little bit of the resources and tools and some of the best practice suggestions that we talked about today. And that is all. Thank you all for coming and learning more about our international students and sharing all of your input about the impacts that they have had. A lot of my resources. And this will be posted on TLC's page for anyone who wants to go back and look at the references, best practices, or any other information. So with that, I'm open for any questions or discussions that you all have about our students. Thank you all.
Taylor?
Yes.
I just have a really quick question. Having faculty who fall into some of these categories that you're talking about in terms of their work visa, amount of time to then be doing their paperwork that will come up and hope that they'll be able to return to their positions. Do you or have you looked at them as well, or how does that happen? I'm learning.
No, thank you so much. That's a really good question. It does come up in all of the research that I have seen. So it's kind of divided. I focused a lot more on what we can do as individuals. Certainly there's a whole other umbrella of what can happen, for work visas. My friend who shared his story, he's in the process right now of switching, hopefully someday, from a student visa to a work visa. And, the OPT, they are so behind too right now in a lot of the process that, the uncertainty is the part that's so scary. Students being told that we're switching to online when all they've been told is you cannot take online classes. You know, there is a lot of uncertainty. I think what we've seen in a lot of places is grace, but students are scared. I have a student who for 7 years didn't travel home on their visa because even though they have that visa, the fear of not being able to enter, and their wife unfortunately was stranded during the travel ban because of that. So there is the two sides. Like I said, a lot of the research that I looked at about the individual, but there's so much research about what universities, what structures, what needs to happen on a much bigger level. I think just support them, support our colleagues, listen, you know, be advocates. If we hear it, share news. I think it spread like wildfire in my group about what was happening visa-wise, but a lot of people outside the group were not hearing about how scared our students were and how many uncertainties there were. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I add to that, Taylor?
Yes, please.
There there are things that one doesn't even realize until you get out of the United States. In many places around the world, U.S. embassies, which is the place where you need to go to get your visa as a student, as a worker, the embassies are closed and they are not open to the public. So, and that's the case here in Argentina. Right now, the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires is closed. They do have some emergency contingencies for special cases, but if you need a visa for the U.S. right now, you're out of luck. And so the fact that things are reopening in the United States is fantastic, but it's not to be assumed that the rest of the world is going at the same pace, because much to the contrary, and that's an issue.
Thank you so much for sharing that. The numbers for this year, there's 16% decrease. Who knows what that will be following? There still is uncertainty. There are a lot of groups optimistic, but unknown. So thank you so much for sharing that. A lot of you, especially with international backgrounds, like I said, I can sit and talk about what I've read, what the research says, but unless you listen to people whose real experience it is, or get to know, they're going to be the best ones who are going to have the information. We just need to make sure that the information is getting out there. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Taylor, can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
I'm interested in, you mentioned this name shout name thing.
Name shout.
Yes, to be able to get correct pronunciation for student names, is that right?
I use it as a starting point. I think the best thing is talking with those students. It's more of a starting point. Yes, it has the tool that we can use. What I've used on a lot of campuses too is just asking my colleagues. I've been fortunate to work with a very diverse background who can help me. I know Chinese names are specifically a struggle on campus for a lot of my colleagues. And so this is just a tool that I use as a starting point. I also like to, it's a good learning. I think we can be good examples for our students that we will take the time to learn it. I just like to walk in with a little background information before I get there.
Yes. So I wonder, does this apply also, and please don't laugh, to English names? Because as a non-native English speaker, I sometimes struggle with American names, right? And they are sometimes not obvious to me, and I make an effort, but they can be a challenge. Does this work also for American names?
That is a really good question. You know, I'm not seeing, yeah, there is an English tool on there. I think what we're seeing in English names too, though, is the unique spellings. So I don't know how modern or caught up it is. TikTok, which of course blew up over COVID-19, they have these wonderful videos of teachers in the year 2030 trying to read a classroom's students' names. So as far as that tool, you can try it. I'm not sure how effective, but there is the English tool on there as well.
Thank you.
Yes. Anything else? I know there are a lot of people in here in this group that work with international students who have an international experience who would like to share anything that, yes, please, Dawn.
I have a question. I'm not
Mhm.
sharing an experience. So I'm just kind of wondering if you could make a single change in everybody's classroom tomorrow, and something we could actually pull off, that would create a palpable improvement in international students' experiences. Kind of what would that be? We've got a lot of resources and things like that. I'm kind of wondering about the one takeaway that we can implement tomorrow to make this better.
Oh, Dawn, that's such a great question. I had that question actually as a job interview question in January before I started at O-Trip. And it was basically saying, if you could do one thing for international students, no money restrictions, what would it be? And one, it would be every single student that wanted to study without the obstacles could be able to study. So, I mean, I think that would be my dream. But as far as what we could do, I really want to see, my number one goal as an instructor is that authentic. If you noticed Amr in all of the experience he's mentioned, it was never about in class what was happening. Everything that he mentioned about his experience was outside of class. Programming, we do so much. And like he mentioned, we're working with 18, 19, that developmental age. How can we make those authentic, real connections? One thing that we don't see in the US that I know some other programs do, but it's not anything like people that happen outside the country. Every time I studied abroad, I was put it with the host family. So I had kids my age. I had families. I still have an abuelo in Chile that I communicate with all of the time. So we keep people at a distance. We will provide our services, but are we opening our homes? Are we opening our arms, our doors? How much are we really letting our students in? So that's a big cultural barrier. I think that's just me personally answering. If I could do one thing, and there are some great people on campus. I have a colleague in study abroad, and she softball everything. She invites every single person. You know, it's like her social group is an international group. And so I think that's it, is how do we create those authentic out of class experiences without saying, okay, you have to attend 3 events, meet this many people, write this paper. I want that authentic. And I'm not sure how we get there, but what I do know is when it does happen, when you see that connection, it is amazing how much our students are learning, how much, and it's just, that's the best way we can learn and spread, you know, education. My quote from my intro slide, how can we change the world? Education. And that doesn't always happen in the classroom. So I think that would be my experience is programming. Programming is really important. Smart programming, authentic programming.
Thank you.
Can I ask a
Thank
question?
you. Yes.
I'm kind of curious, if I was an international student, and I may be speaking completely out of turn, you know, when I would be thinking about studying in the United States, I'd probably first be thinking about states with a more international profile than Kansas, and certainly more established international communities. And I'm wondering, what could we do in Kansas to raise our profile when we obviously don't have a whole bunch of American culture that's built around our state identity?
You know, that's so interesting. One thing I did do in my advising, so I advised international students for 2 years, and I kept track. Always, I threw in the question, so why K-State? I did have one student say they thought they were going to Manhattan, New York. So there has been that incident. From what, you know, if you listen to our students, they love it when they get here. This is the first time that they've the fresh air, Amr, I had to cut down a lot of his responses, but how easy Manhattan life was. There's a lot. And, you know, you talk about our culture. We hosted a group of students from Fulbright students from Pakistan, and there is so much culture that we introduce them to. You know, we have the tribes of Kansas. We have such a history of so many different groups. People love the history of Kansas when they get here. We have the Brown versus Board of Education, significant, not far, you know, from campus. So I think it is just And this is easy too. When I lived in the Dominican Republic, I would do something different every weekend that my students would never even dream of doing. And I think it's because when we're here, we take these things for granted. We don't recognize that they are. As far as raising a profile, you know, you look at the states, Texas, California, New York, and they do draw students. I've had students that after a semester of being here, they're like, I just want to go to New York and on vacation, you know, before COVID, where are you going this weekend? I'd have students flying to California on the weekends. So I think it is just, what do we have that we are special and unique about? And we have a lot. We really do. We have great programs that students come for. We have, it's a great place for families. A lot of our international students with families love Manhattan. So I think it's just identifying what we are, but it is a competitive market. You know, there are a lot of options of where students can go. So I don't know if I have a good answer, but if I could break that code, I think I would be pretty good in the field if I could figure out how to get more students.
Right. And I didn't mean to suggest that we don't have things that we aren't known for globally, but
yeah, you're
they're
right.
just not part of the American brand.
Yeah.
I've found, Leslie, when I've talked to our international students, a lot of our graduate students tell me, and I think Taylor sort of said that our students really appreciate the rural environment because a lot of them grew up in a rural environment and they find that easier to adapt to, coming from places that are very similar to their own homes, very agri-based. I mean, that transition is easier than we would think, as opposed to very urban like Chicago. But as Taylor said, I see that they usually want to travel to the bigger cities, but not necessarily to live there, not to stay there, but to find out what they're like. So I'm surprised at how many times I hear that they really like this environment because it's easier to adapt to. But it was another question I was gonna ask Taylor about, and I'm trying to remember what it was now that I've answered her question, but and it may just take me a moment to sort it. But you know, you were talking about the Fulbright program, and so I want to go back to that a bit. That those of us who traveled to various places around the world for a week or two have a totally different perception of what it feels like to be a foreigner in a country when you do a 6-month, 5-week, 6-month, year-long Fulbright. And I think sharing those experiences with our international students of how we felt when we were in other countries is helpful in identifying with their experiences in this country. So it's a little different for those who may go for a couple of days or a week.
Which that is a difference too. I talked a little bit about students coming from other countries and us going. Also, there's a significant difference of the time. So international students coming, their entire education, a lot of times can be in the US. Our students, a semester, a couple of weeks. Semester is long for our students. So that's a significant difference of the students that we're sending versus students studying here. I also want to mention, Brandon, I saw in the chat that came up that a lot of our students hear from other students. I kept a log and I did a graphic and a chart just for my own interest of why our students said they come here. A majority of it is they knew someone who came to K-State. Which is a great resource, but like mentioned earlier, are we on that national map of getting students to come without hearing about why we really are special? Thank you all, great discussion. Any other questions or comments, wonderful comments or ideas?
We are actually about out of time. So one of the things that I want to kind of point out is that part of the purpose of our series is to create connections on campus. And one of the things that I'm really grateful that Taylor was able to do is to provide us resources. And now we know who to talk to when we have these questions about how we can better support our international students. So please join me for thanking Taylor today and this very awesome presentation. Lots of great resources and lots of things to think about. Again, remind you, this is a series that happens every Wednesday at noon. Next Wednesday, we have a seminar given by Brent Weaver, Mariah Vaughn, and Tara Coleman on how to build empathy through role play. So we're really excited about that. And one more time, I'll remind you that we have a Teachers Telling Stories video series that just started yesterday. Check that one out. Lots more coming up. If you want to be part of that series, please reach out. And a couple of you I've reached out to, and I'm waiting to hear back if you're going to be involved. So as always, thank you for all the things you do for our students at K-State, and thank you for coming today. I really enjoyed today.
Thank you. Thank you. Last shout out, please, if you want to continue